Hello, welcome to Mark Langley's Horsemanship Podcast, a podcast helping people to understand their horses better, to provide solutions in a calm, connected way. I'm Jenny Langley.
And I'm Mark Langley.
Mark, this is a question that's come from Susan from Australia, and she would like to know a little bit more about horses' eyes. Now, we've got two eyes on the front of our head. Horses have them slightly on the side. She's wondering if you can enlighten us on how horses are different in each eye and why that might be. She's noticed that her horse tends to focus much more on his near side eye, so much so that he's sort of on top of her, but on his offside eye, he is very strongly averse to anything there, and he really tries to run away on that side. So he has been the most different in each eye, very, very stark contrast that she's ever seen, and she'd like to understand it better. So is this right? Do they act differently depending on what eye you're standing on or doing something from?
Yeah, most definitely. And with horses, like you got one side of the brain that controls the other side of the body sort of thing, so and vice versa. So the thing about the eyes, I've been fascinated, and you can never quite, there's so many different scenarios with different horses, how when you build confidence on one side, then things change a little bit, and you know, it always changes. But the first thing, and the thing that you're having trouble with, was the very first thing that I ever noticed years ago working with a lot of unhandled horses, was the eye that they let you on versus the eye that they won't let you on. Okay, so what it sort of, you know, and initially looking at that years ago, it seemed to be that there was one side of their brain that forced them to want to put them on that window so they could process and it was kind of like guard you and keep you guarded with that eye, you know, keep you there, but they'll process you on that side, allow you on that side. But the other side, the other window, they're like, no, I can't. I'd rather put you on this side. I can't have you on that side because, no, this side of my brain processes better. So obviously it uses that eye, and that's the eye I'm going to kind of keep you on. So, you know, there's a saying that I have at clinics, and it's that saying, it's an old saying that everybody knows, is you keep your friends close and you keep your enemies closer. So, you know, the horses that keep your two eyes on all the time and they don't want you to go behind them, well, I say to them, you know, that saying, because, you know, I'm going to keep you at the front of my eyes and stare at you, and you're not even going to get down the sides of one eye because I need those two front eyes on you because you're really scary. And the only time that those two eyes won't be on you is when I'm running off. So you've got that scenario. But in the sense of the guarded side, like the side that they keep you on and then the side that they won't let you on, there's two things you got to sort of really look at, and that's where I came up with the leading by scenario. When I stopped driving horses, the one day that I had my penny drop, my light bulb moment, was I got to stop sending them off and then trying to crawl down their side. And I started doing lessons with young horses where I just got them to gradually go past me and then back out and go past me. And what I was looking for on their bad side was them to just engage with me and soften a little bit and then back off a little bit and then come in until they could actually process me on the other side. So the more worried a horse is, the more they're going to put you on their confident eye. The less worried they are, the more chances that you're going to get on their less confident eye, the less confident one to process you. Okay, so what I say to people is, and that's why I've got the Rapunzel story of, the more worry in the princess locked in the castle, the more she looks out the left window, because the bird said the prince is going to come to the left window to save you. So Rapunzel, when the witch is walking up the staircase, the witch being anxiety, Rapunzel runs to the left, did I say the left or right window? Anyway, the window that the prince is going to turn up is the left window, so she's hanging out the left window going, I can hear the witch, is the prince going to save me today? Okay, so that's why I tell that story about Rapunzel. So basically you tip anxiety into a horse.
Hang on. Stop. What is the end of that story? You can't just leave us in suspense. Did she get saved by the prince?
No, she killed the witch. I made up a new story. So basically, So basically, the prince, he ran off with some other princess somewhere else. He wasn't the nicest prince, actually. He just kind of, what's that?
He never showed up.
So he never showed up. So basically, the little bird was kind of telling a fib. So Rapunzel eventually killed the witch. She got brave enough and killed the witch. And she didn't use a hair to put down the castle. She used it to wrap around the witch to kill her. So basically, what I'm saying there sounds like a terrible story, but all fairy tales are terrible in some fashion. But if you kill the anxiety, the extra anxiety in a horse, and the anxiety comes down, then basically the horse becomes a little bit more centered and able to process both equally through its left and right eye. Okay, so when they're less guarded, when they're less worried, you have more chance of them thinking about you on both eyes and processing you the same on both sides. If you get them scared, they'll want to flip back to that confident side that sort of makes bigger decisions when there's an emergency sort of thing. So basically, if you can sort of, some horses that are very guarded down one side, I'm figuring out what makes them so anxious. And it could be they might have been beaten, they might have been chased, they might have had some things going on. Some horses are just anxious because they're wild and they've never had anything to do with people. Either way, it's some form of graded exposure that gets them to come down, or you might do something special to get rid of their anxiety and then have a more of a neutral go at their brain or their eyes. But basically, what you're doing on the side that doesn't process you very well, that you might just use graded exposure. So I do it by just leading them up a little bit till they soften, backing them off, leading them up till they soften, backing them off, until they can process me as they go past me and go, oh, I'm looking at you with the right eye and I'm okay, or the left eye, depending on what side it is. And then once you get them to be able to process you both sides, you work very hard on making it equal. So, you might have to do one side more than the other. And then sometimes they flip. I've had horses that flip over and they actually start to get used to one eye a bit more. And they go, actually, I like kind of looking you on that eye. And then they get a bit funny on the other eye, but you've got to keep it even all the time. The other thing you've got to really do when you're working them is make sure that they're always, so some horses, and I've met horses at clinics that have always been guarded, like Rapunzel, hanging out the window their whole life looking for a prince, and never actually under saddle looked through this particular horse once I'm really thinking I would look through its left eye.
I was going to ask you to tell the story about the horse that never looked through one particular eye and the trouble that you had with it.
The lady's on my next clinic with a daughter, not a daughter, but a similar genetic to that horse. And I remember meeting the daughter and helping her start it. And I said, you got to watch this horse because she, as a young horse, well, she wasn't young actually. She was already 8 or 9 when we started her. So she's already had a few years under her belt, but her genetics mean she's a gazer. And the one that the lady's ridden is similar genetics that was in her early 20s or 20 at the time. She was a strong gazer too. And just at a recent clinic, she's done one clinic and she's just come to another one. I had the daughter again. I said, be careful with this gazing. I said, we have to get this mare in because she's starting to gaze off and she's doing what the older mare's doing. So we have to really get her to let go of that and process. So she's constantly thinking all the time. Otherwise, it's in her genetics just to do this, and then you'll have her out there all the time. But this other one, every time she rode her, it doesn't matter if you put her on a circle, on a long line, or you rode her, she was always cocked out to the right, like she was looking off into the distance, hoping that she'd get out there for safety. It was like she was kind of always running off in her mind, but she never did anything wrong and she made Dan always feel safe. It's just that she was always carrying tension, braced, and she showed it in her expression and her face and stuff like that. And I sat on her for 40 minutes and I was playing with the left rein just to get her to just walk the primary focus across and just look through her left eye. I finally got a little breakthrough where she just rolled the eye and looked a little bit, but as soon as she moved, bang, straight to the right eye. She just had to flex a muscle, and you could see as soon as there was movement, she'd boom straight out the right eye and just like fixate, like I can't do that. And I sat on her, as I said, for 40 minutes, and I didn't go very far. I was only in the space of about 2 meters, and I picked up the rein, finally got her to look left, and then hold it just a little longer, and then just sort of go and then let off, and she sort of back to the right a bit, and she just sit there cocked to the right, and I'm like, okay. Finally got to look to the left a bit more and then loosen an inside front foot. And as she picked up the foot, she stayed thinking to the left. But as soon as that foot dropped back to the ground, boom, right to the right. So I said, well, I've got to start. I've got a movement where she actually thought to the left and shifted her body a tiny bit. It was only a tiny, tiny bit, but it was a breakthrough. What the real breakthrough was when she finally, by the 40-minute mark, I think, she picked up a foot and placed the foot and kept her thoughts to the left. And it was only like a placement of that far. It was only just a pick up and step, just the tiniest step. So she actually thought about moving in that direction, and she kept her thoughts to the left until the foot placed. And I went, wow, that's her first step. ever to the left, I believe. But yeah, as soon as you felt any movement in her body, she might look to the left a tiny bit, but as soon as she went to move, bang, straight to the right. And went, so that one final movement of the thought of a step where she actually placed and like picked up and placed a foot was a bit of a breakthrough. By that time, she was sweating, like she was sweating. It was felt like I was being mean to her, but I said to the owner, I have to get through this because she's been a whole life running away in her mind. And I said, it's not fair. It's not fair for her to constantly be ridden, constantly escaping, like looking for the prince, off into the distance, worried that he's going to turn up and he's never going to turn up. So anyway, she was in a sweat by the time, and we didn't go fast. We didn't do anything. It was just holding that rein. And the amount of mental resistance in her bringing her thoughts across to that side it was almost like there was no pathway there. It was like we were trying to hammer through the Berlin Wall to get to the other side. And then we got to the other side. We made a hole in that pathway so she could roll across and look left. And a fascinating thing happened, and that's why I'll never forget this story, is because it kind of blew me away a little bit, the power of making a change in a horse. So as I said, she was in a lather of sweat. She'd made this tiny step to the left, and she went, oh, I've done that. I've never done that before. The owner came in and rode her the next day, and she looked different. She was like, wow, she's looking different. She's looking in the middle when she was riding. I said, ride her off to the left. And I said, just trot her. And she trotted her, and this mare trotted this beautiful circle to the left, and she dropped her head down, and she just breathed, and she focused to the left, and she went round the whole arena, trotting to the left like as happy as Larry. And I'm like, well, there you go. That brace was worth it. That sweat was worth it. It was good because I switched something in her brain. And I said to the owner, I think that's the first time she's ever gone to the left. She goes, well, that's the first time I've ever seen her go to the left like that in her life. And then I rode her a year or so later or two later at another clinic, and I said, it's funny riding this mare now. I said, I think she's actually better to the left than the right. That was her side. That was her good side. That was her side that she felt better on. And when she finally trusted to go that way, she goes, oh, thank God I can go that way. I kind of like it. And I think because she was so guarded, she was always on her dominant kind of anxiety eye, which sometimes, and this is the funny thing about it, it muddles me sometimes, because sometimes I've got horses that you can't approach them on one side, but then, like I had a colt once that I couldn't get down one side of him, and then he finally could, and then he'd always want to run out on the, spin around and get me on the other eye, so he wouldn't let me on his right eye. So when I started to ride him, I could only walk him, and I finally could bend him and he could look to the right without spinning his head back to the left and wanting to get me in the left eye. And then I could finally, trot him, and he could look to the right till I could finally canter him. And then all of a sudden I'm thinking, oh, crikey, he actually steers worse to the left, because he always steered better than the left because he wanted to keep me on the left. Like when he was looking at me, he always was bracey to the right because he's always springing back to go, oh, I don't like seeing you on that side. I want to go to this side. But then when I finally kind of got him going and got him even, I'm thinking, actually, he's actually going really nice on the right rein. He looks right and he's thinking right. He doesn't go left very well. I've broke him now. I've made him opposite. But what I realised is once I got him neutral and he was calm and he wasn't frightened of me anymore, he showed me his dominant eye. So I went down this laneway and there was mares on one side. So I rode down one side with all the mares on one side. And when he had the mares on his right eye, he was Fabio. He was like, what's it? Pepe Le Pew. He's like, hey, gee, look at you girls. I'm over here. Ooh. And he's going on. And then I rode down the lane and I turned back. I put the left eye on and he's like, boring old mares. And I turn around and go the other way, and he's like, hey, ladies. It was quite funny. So the first bit was scary, as in when he was scared, he didn't want to look at me with his right eye. But it turned out his right eye was his thinking eye. It seemed to be more of his processing eye, and it was communicating more through that eye to sort of things. And usually sometimes when a horse is scared of you, they tend to put you on their strong focus eye. So I thought it was funny how he flipped sides of what he was scared of and not scared of, but then he used that eye to sort of communicate to the mares more. So anyway, but so never ever believe exactly what I say, because you'll always see something in a horse and go, oh, that's interesting. It won't be always this eye, that eye.
Yeah.
But there'll always be usually a guarded eye and a confident eye when you approach a horse. That's the most simple one you've got to fix first. The second one you fix is which eye do they like going through. So there's two areas of imbalance when you train horses. The one that's the scary eye versus the confident eye on us, and then there's the which eye they go to things through, and then sometimes that can be the opposite.
To the analytical eye and the flight path eye. So when you were training, I remember, when you were starting horses full time, there was one particular horse, I think, that you would You sort of were it was quite different with his eyes. And I think you had a bit of problem with him when if he just caught you on one eye, that was it. He'd go into, something would happen when you were riding him. Quite dangerous, wasn't it?
Oh, there was one little horse. Well, the little colt that I just talked about, he had that similar thing. But there was one horse, a little grey Arab I started years ago, and he was very frightened on one eye. And if I didn't go through my ritual every day of graded exposure on his right or left eye, and like, because I'm trying to sort of talk on a podcast, like. And if everyone has a bad day and you didn't do something right, don't feel bad, because sometimes when I teach people, sometimes I'm saying do as I say, not as I do, because I've done mistakes to learn not to make mistakes. So there's days that I was having complacent days and she'll be right, thinking about the next horse. And so I used to go through this little ritual with this horse where I'd bend him a little bit to the right and to the left to make sure he'd actually process me on the right eye and the left eye and the right eye and the left eye. And once I did that little ritual, I could walk him right, left, and I had to do a little ritual of graded exposure from the right to the left. And then once he could do a full bend and turn and move and into a turn on both eyes without flinching away from me, then I could do that ritual at a jog. And then once I did it at the jog, he'd gone through, I can switch from my left side of my brain to my right side of my brain and left eye, right eye, smoothly in flow. He had to do it in flow. So anyway, this day I didn't do my ritual. I thought, he's going all right. He's had about, this many rides now. He'll be fine. And then I started jogging him, and I didn't do the exact left, right enough times to get him okay. So I started trotting him, and then I went to the right, and he said, you haven't got me used to the right eye yet. So as I bend him like that, he just launched himself sideways and fall on his side. And I'm like, wow, that's a decent reaction. And stupid me, that happened to me twice on him because I didn't give him enough graded exposure. But once I rode him for sort of 3 weeks, then what really helped him, once I did the ritual and got him good, and then I could trot him left and right, it was a lot of like serpentines and going around trees and constantly going from the left bend to the right bend, to the left bend, to the right bend, until he's like, left side of my brain. Well, obviously don't want to confuse people, but obviously there's two sides of the brain, and right side runs left side runs right. So you're constantly cross-wiring it all the time when you're doing these changes of directions. So it was by not holding him on one circle for too long or the other circle. I think that's a key when it comes to helping these horses when you ride them, is you do lots of transition from the left bend right through the straight line to the right bend to the left bend, 55,000 if you have to. So, and with him, if I did enough, then I could walk, trot, canter, and up to a gallop, and he could change eyes. But if I didn't do that each day for a certain amount of days, I wasn't cross-wiring him enough, and then he'd suddenly freeze, and then I'd catch him out of the blue, and that's when he'd do that big sideways jump. But he'd just launch himself like a cat, that sees a cucumber and jumps. He'd just launch himself sideways and just fall on his side. So, yeah, and so it's really important, left, right, constantly until, in slow speed, and then eventually you go a bit faster until you can go from the left bend to the right bend with no resistance.
Fascinating. Thank you for enlightening us about the eyes, and also with your stories, the Rapunzel story. Well worth listening to. I think there's a video on it somewhere on YouTube as well. If you want to hear the full story, it does get longer. So if you're interested in hearing Mark tell more stories live, then he does quite a few of them at clinics just to get through the day and make sort of help educate people in certain ways about their horses. We've got next year's clinic release is coming up in September. So if any of you out there are interested in jumping on one of Mark's clinics, look out for the clinic release. Make sure you get our emails, which come out almost every week. Because you guys will be the ones that will be able to get the dates and access to book first before everyone else. So that's our email newsletters. All right. Thank you so much for your time, Mark. Thanks for your knowledge again. And thanks to all our listeners for being there. And we hope this helps. And we'll talk to you again next week.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, everybody.
If you'd like to ask Mark your question and get his insights to help you and your horse, it's easy to join Mark Langley online. Head over to marklangley.com.au and hit join. It's less than a couple of coffees, and the Q&A is just a piece of a whole package designed to support you and your horse with great training.